Welcome to FaithCast, a Faith in the Forest ministry. Be sure to hit that notification bell to stay up to date on great new content. Now, here is your host, Pastor Keith.
Hey everybody, welcome to FaithCast, where we share the truth and love without pushing religion. Not in the studio today, actually. I'm up here at the Grange Hall because I want to answer some questions. I've gotten a lot of feedback since we did that first video a long time ago, actually what kicked off this whole channel, of us leaving the United Methodist Church. I've got lots of questions and insights, and people have actually asked me to come out and talk to their churches from all the way up from the West Coast here into the East Coast. And so I thought today I'm going to do, as quick as I can, because I know everybody hates long videos, a step-by-step how we left the United Methodist Church and became the chapel at TDU Creek. So let's get into it. And the number one thing which overarches everything else you do is to pray and make sure you are putting the glory of God first and you are looking at the vision of where God is sending you. And that's really the first thing I want to bring up. It's the first thing we had to do. When we left the United Methodist Church, we had to make a decision of why were we leaving? What was the purpose for us to be moving in a different direction? And we got together, and you have to all be willing to talk about it. Everybody needs to be willing to have open discussion and conversation. Now for us, if you watched my rambling video on when we left the United Methodist Church, ours was a financial reason. The building was destroying us. And we became aware of that and we laid it before God. And this is really interesting because if we look at where we are now, that was clear back in 2016 we started having that conversation. It's now 2022. We're still active, we're still growing, we're still moving forward. And interestingly, the very first concern we took before God and said, God, this is our problem. If we are obedient to you, where should we go? We ended up now sharing. We rent from a local Grange. We pay a whopping $25 a week for rent, plus we help share utilities. And so the biggest burden we had was the building. That's what was destroying us as a church has now become a blessing because now we share with another nonprofit organization. And we are now working together with that organization to reach out into the greater community. So take the reason, number one, after prayer, is why do you really need to leave the denomination? Where is God sending you? Okay, let's lay this out. So we've talked about prayer. Now let's lay out what happened as the congregation prayed together. We prayed individually, we prayed corporately, we came together, we made the decision, we need to do something different because this building is financially destroying us. What is next? And this is the big thing that I fear a lot of churches trying to leave the United Methodist Denomination aren't thinking about. Everybody's thinking about, well, we want to leave because of A, B, C, D, whatever, but not where do we go next? Because the next question we had to ask, this is next on the list, okay, we need to leave because of this reason. Where are we going? What is the vision? You have to have a vision beyond, I just want to leave the denomination. That's not a vision, that's a reaction to an issue. A vision is something God lays on your heart and says, this is where you should be going. And in ours, we saw a community hurting, we saw that we were not being good stewards. And in the end, our vision became, God, teach us how to be good stewards of what we do have. Okay, so with that in mind, let's get into the business of it. Here's what we had to do. Number one, everybody stopped tithing to the church. I don't want to say everybody. The majority of the church stopped tithing to the local church at that time. We were still meeting every Sunday, but tithes were not coming in. And the idea was that everybody was holding their tithe for God until God revealed where it was we were supposed to be. And if it meant that we were still going to be with that church and we had an idea of where to move forward, then everybody would bring their money in then. And if we were supposed to be going somewhere else, then the money would go there. And the argument on it was, once you tithe it to the local United Methodist Church, it belongs to the United Methodist Church. And you can't take that money with you. That comes up to the next issue. What did the local church do with the money? Well, we made the decision to go ahead and just give it away. Ethically, legally, and morally. We gave it away to local organizations that could do it. And this is probably the biggest sticking point for any church trying to leave the United Methodist Denomination. You're worried about your building, and you're worried about the money, the assets you have. And so really the next step in the process is to acknowledge it's not yours. It's God's. And you need to leave it to God and let God take care of it and not worry about taking it with you. And I can give you several Bible verses that'll call you out on this, right? You can't put your hand to the plow and then turn around. Let the dead bury their own dead. You have to be willing to start over with nothing. It is easier to get a camel through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get to heaven. And if you are so worried about these worldly assets that you feel like you have to take with you, or they're yours, or you want to protect them, then you're not really looking at the vision God has for you. And here's how I'm going to clarify that. If you truly believe in your heart, in your prayer, and in your essence that it is God's will that you hold on to that building and be able to move forward with doing ministry with it, then leave it up to God. Let it go, and if it's meant for you to be there with it, it will return. But the fight and the argument that's going along in so many of the conferences, that's not God's will. And I urge all of you to not fight with it. But anyhow, I'm going off on a tangent. Let's get back to specifically what we did. Easy for us to let go of the building. That's what was destroying us. Easy for us to let go of all the money. It wasn't ours. And so all of the money that was already in the United Methodist account was legally donated to nonprofit organizations, some of them other United Methodist organizations. But we let go of it. And then we started to have regular conversations outside of the Methodist Church, outside the Methodist property. We would meet in other places, and we would have discussions on what is our vision, what does it look like, what do we want to do, what are the ministries we want to do, where do we want to go, and with the idea that we were open and fluid to what God would reveal to us. And that's one of the most important things, I think, is to be open to what God wants, because we certainly didn't plan on being up here in the middle of the national forest. I mean, take a look.
As you make your plans, you have to be fluid to where God is sending you and be willing to go where He sends you. Remember that old song, "Here I Am, Lord." Don't sing it if you don't mean it. And as we got up here, we are literally surrounded by the Allegheny National Forest. This wasn't our original plan, but this is where God has sent us, and this is where we have been blessed and where we are flourishing. So you have to be open to where God is going to send you.
So, yeah, we are pretty much literally in the middle of nowhere, and yet we have a flourishing little church. Now, the next step we had to do is we were open to God's vision, we were open to what we got to do. Now we had to seek legal counsel to put all of our ducks in a row. And we went with Start Church. This is not a paid promotion for Start Church. I'm not endorsing them. I'm just going to say, as a previous customer, things went really well for us. They helped us work through all of the legal matters that we had to. Get a little bit ahead of myself, because before we could get to that point, we had to put our own sense of a board of directors, who was going to be in charge. And I know some people argue that a church should not be a 501c3. We can have that argument someplace else. That's such an antiquated thought. So we went with Start Church. And through Start Church, our legal counsel, or whatever legal counsel you want to go through, then we were able to lay in our legal board of directors. We were able to file for a 501c3, and we were able to put our bylaws together. And what is our discipline? What doctrine did we want to follow as a local church? And it was really cool, because we, as the entire local church, got together and we got to debate and look at and think about it. It was nice, because Start Church actually would throw out, like, here's sort of some standard mixes of different denominations. It's almost hard to put a church together today and not be influenced by some other denomination. And so we hammered through that. Again, we have been fluid to the idea of our doctrine and our bylaws as we have grown individually and as we have grown as a church, that some of our doctrine and our bylaws have become more set based on how we are able to to see the world now as God is having us see it, and not how the denomination was having us see it. I mean, we were really influenced by the denomination, and it took a little time for us to realize we needed to get rid of some of that and really see where, it's sort of weird. We needed to be authentic Christians, and to be authentic, we needed to let go of a lot of the Methodist baggage. And so through Start Church, they helped us with all the legal papers, and the money was there because people were not tithing to the local church. And so when we needed money to pay for the legal fees or the processing fees, the money was showing up. We had people who were willing to tithe to it, and they generally saw it as a tithe because it's where God wanted us to be. And so after we had all of the paperwork in place, and we also went out and had to get insurance, which if you're a church right now, you're already carrying insurance. We go through Church Mutual. We just went through Church Mutual and went, here's who we are. Here's our 501c3, and here's our expectations of how many people we plan for attendance. And we just got insurance. And guess what? That's it. Oh, initially we had to come up with where were we going to worship. And if you watch the other video, we went through a few different places before we ended up here. And really that was it. And the biggest thing is, if you want to be independent, if you want to get rid of the denomination and they're telling you, oh, we have this book of discipline and there's these pathways, we'll let you out. If you're willing to let go of everything and walk away, then it's pretty easy to walk away from the denomination. Just go, well, here's your building, here's what's left in the bank account. We're going to go follow Jesus now. Now, there is one caveat that I am leaving out as I'm talking about this, and it's probably the hardest thing. Now, we'll say the second hardest thing. The hardest thing is for people to just let go of your buildings and let go of the money. God will bless you. We can attest to that. In fact, here's one of the cool little ministries we do that most churches try to save a penny on. When we went off on our own, one of the things we realized was we had to change the way we were doing things. We couldn't just leave the denomination, leave the building, start over, but then start doing the exact same habits over again and think that we were going to be a healthy church. So one of the things we did was, instead of buying the big giant bins of discount coffee, we actually use our coffee time as a ministry, and we spend a little bit more, but it's part of our tithing out to the community, where we buy White King Coffee, which is in Warren, PA. Look it up. It's a really cool ministry. Well, they're not a ministry. It's secular, but they provide jobs for the blind and disabled. It's really, really cool, and they have great coffee. So instead of trying to always save the money, we're actually good stewards of it by sending it out where we think it needs to go. We also do that with our mountain bike ministry on Rock Solid MTB, if you want to check that out, and with what we try to invest into this YouTube channel. So those are a few of the ways that we're trying to be good stewards and look forward with a vision instead of just doing the exact same thing over again. Okay, enough of this ramble. Let's get back to the other video. Okay, so now let me finish up with this, because if you're not willing to let go of your building and let go of all your assets and just start over, we're not the church to ask how to leave the United Methodist Church. Our policy was to drop everything and pick up our cross and follow Jesus. And we didn't worry about any of the other stuff. But it's unfair for me to say that in one aspect, because one of the things that a lot of people are worried about is the pension fund and the pastors. And what do the pastors do? How do you pay your pastor? What if you have no money to pay your pastor? For our specific situation, I did not start out my career in the ministry. I started out in the medical field. And so if you watch any of our other sermons or a lot of my other videos, I talk about being in the medical field. And so I am a bivocational pastor. So my salary doesn't come from the church. So that is one aspect I can't answer for those of you who have full-time pastors and you want to try to continue on. you'll have to sit down and assess your finances. How long would it take you to tithe or to do fundraising or whatever it is you have to do to get to the point where you can actually be paying a full-time salary? And what does that look like? When you guys are setting up your doctrines and your disciplines, what is the expectation of your pastor and what is the expectation of the local congregation? Because that was another thing that we really looked at, is a lot of things in the United Methodist Church that it says, well, the pastor has to do these 3,000 things. We as a church look at it and go, here's the role of our spiritual leader. This is what I'm called to do for the health of the church, and then to also be out in the secular world. That's how we're doing it. I pray for each of you that are really struggling with it. I pray for those of you who are upset because I rambled about letting go of your buildings and your money, and that's what you're holding on to. And if that's what you're really, really holding on to, are you really, truly following God with where you're at? You have to be honest, and that's the final step, and we have to continue to do that here. You have to be honest with yourself. Is where and how are you genuinely serving Jesus Christ, and how are you fulfilling the Great Commission? Because if you're sitting in a building that's struggling and dying now, what are you going to do differently? What if you leave the denomination? What are you going to do different that's going to save you? If you're only paying $1,000 or $2,000 apportionment and you only have a part-time pastor now, okay, so you've saved that bit of finances, but you're still going to have your building. All the other financial obligations are still going to be there. You pay them now. How is your ministry going to be any different? That is a question you have to answer. That is, what is God's vision in corporate prayer, working it out together, having honest conversations, not being afraid to have an argument or two, not being afraid to disagree in love and work through it, but you have to have a vision of where God is sending you. This isn't where I expected to be, but I couldn't feel more blessed. So I'll continue to pray for all of you. If you have any questions specific that I didn't address or answer, leave them in the comments. And all right, take care. God bless.